this is, I said, this was just one interaction where it was so obvious, and it's so obvious that he's in the wrong, and he still sees himself as a nice guy. He still thinks he did nothing wrong. Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So in the theme of movies, this is take two. If you haven't listened to our last episode, it's entertaining for a number of different reasons. But we had planned to record this episode last time, and then the conversation found a rabbit hole and then another rabbit hole. And we ended up recording a completely different episode to the one that we thought we were going to record. So we've saved the movies for this time. I am incredibly disappointed though, because I wore a specific top that had all the colors of all three shapes in it for the movies episode. And then we recorded something else. So I'm just in purple now. So
I feel like I got the black shirt, like my cheeks are red from running around changing. I got the
I should have worn green
ecosystem eyes. Like I got all my colors here.
Oh, you're covered. You got it all covered. Yeah. So we'll start off very similar to how we started off last time, because it's important to give the same context that we thought we were giving to a movies episode that ended up being used in a very different way last time. So it's important to say that this came about because I had a friend of mine who we were talking about the shapes, and they were saying that it would be helpful to be able to have some kind of more tangible examples of what these things look like, quote unquote, in real life, in order to better understand them. And from my experience, when I first started doing this, and I think this is true of Serena as well, is that when you first start learning about the shapes, it can actually be more helpful to start looking at works of fiction to begin with, because there's less charge associated with it, unless you're completely obsessed with a particular movie or character or what have you, which case you may have some feelings about it. But generally speaking, it's a little easier to spot these things in a fictional setting than even in a documentary setting or a reality TV. I mean, as real as reality TV is. And this is speaking as somebody who watches a lot of reality TV. So I don't feel like I'm speaking out of turn there. But like even in those situations, because we know these are real situations, it can sometimes cause us to have a little bit more of a distorted view on things. And we may end up feeling sympathy for somebody who maybe really doesn't deserve our sympathy, but because we've been conditioned to give certain people in certain positions sympathy, so it's a little bit easier to do this with fiction to begin with. Let's just start off there.
I just want to jump in there really quickly.
Yeah,
like
do.
if you choose to do this on your own, like it's harder to do on your own unless you're Claire or myself, just because we know the shape that like it's like to see the nuanced things and be like, oh nope, they pinged. You don't see it, but they pinged because of this.
Yeah.
We had talked about it a couple of episodes ago. We had brought up The Handmaid's Tale and the situation with one of the characters on there who, like, in the end, you find out isn't the great guy that you wanted to believe he was. And I know I had some feelings about that. I want to suggest not doing this with something that you are invested in the characters, because then you have to process your own feelings around it. Like, when I found, like, when I connected the dots and saw, we were talking about one of the main characters, Nick, when I saw like he was solidly in that red triangle for most, if not the entirety of this thing, I was like, oh, and then I had to process 5 seasons of like, oh, now that I know this, and it was it was a little overwhelming for me doing this as we do regularly as we do. And even I was like, oh shit, I have to process this. And this is a fictional character. So
Right.
it's easier to do it with something that you really don't like,
Less attached
you don't
to.
have that emotional investment in.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to say, that's not to say that if you're watching something you love watching, that you should be like blocking this out, because the chances are you're going to see it anyway. But if you're actually trying to do it with something that's maybe a little less close to home, might be helpful. The other thing that Serena said that she kind of alluded to, but I think is really important and helpful to say, is if you are able to find somebody else who you can be like, hey, can you listen to these podcast episodes and then can we watch a movie together and do it together? Like the conversation and the discussion around it, like when you're doing it with somebody else, it can be so much easier and actually more enjoyable, because you get to kind of bounce it off each other and be like, oh, but what about this? And have you thought about it from this way? Like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So yeah, this is this. So, I mean, like I've done it with, Serena and I do it kind of retrospectively with a lot of things. Like we'll be like, oh, so-and-so this and so-and-so and that. And I'm like, oh yeah, like we might not be doing it as we're doing it. But sometimes it can be really a great idea to actually watch something together with somebody, if you can, who has the same understanding that you do, because they've listened to the same information and can give context that can be really helpful. What started the conversation in the last episode, and we're not going down the same rabbit hole, I promise you this, is that when we started to look at this and look at movies, we wanted to make sure that they were popular movies that people would have seen a lot, so that people were more likely just listening to the podcast episode to be able to understand what it was we were talking about and recall those scenes and those characters and those situations. And the challenge is that a lot of the examples that we came up with referred to, the characters in them were children. And therefore the victim triangle, the drama triangle doesn't apply in the same way as it would do if it was adult to adult. If you don't understand why, go back and listen to the last episode. That's the rabbit hole we fell down. We went tumbling head first down that rabbit hole, careering off the sides as we went. So I'm not going to go into it any more than that right now. We don't need to. We did it plenty. We did it justice last time. But if you want to know more about that, and especially where it shows up in like parenting dynamics, the last episode is a really good one to listen to. So when it came to looking at movies where there were children depicted, even if the actors weren't children, it was really important for us to kind of sidestep those, because we don't want people to get used to applying these dynamics to situations involving children when there's so much nuance associated with that, and we wanted to avoid that. Anything you want to say about that before we
well, I just think it was very surprising as we were going through. Like Claire and I came back with examples, and she's like, "Oh, they all have children." I was like, "Oh yeah, I see that." And then I'm like, "Well, what about this?" And I'm like, "Oh," like she's like, "That's a child." Like I'm like, "No, that person's properly an adult." And she's like, "No, that's an adult playing
the
a child."
actor is an adult, yes, but
and it tricks our brain, but it also shows us like how rooted we are in this like disempowerment dynamic and in the drama triangle, because like, so many of these movies had this element and so many were centered around children. It was like, oh wow.
And also just further, the one thing I will say, like kind of further to what we talked about last time, because we're now specifically talking about the movies, is the fact that these dynamics are so prevalent in movies depicting children. That was the word I was trying to find last time and I couldn't. Is that a lot of those children are watching those movies and they're learning that's the way to operate. So in the same way as they're going to get that conditioning from parents, grandparents, friends, teachers, they're also going to get it from movies and TV. So when you start to see these dynamics in children's movies and movies that are depicting children, it's also going to add to that influence that children are probably going to go in that direction as well. The other thing to say is that when it comes to looking at movies, I was trying to look for movies that were, as we talked about in the last episode, one of the things that's really important to recognize is that there's a lot more nuance and it gets a lot more complicated when there are other power dynamics at play. So when we are talking about a situation in which maybe there's a boss and a subordinate in a work environment, or where there is a place where so for example, maybe there is a power dynamic within an intimate relationship. So maybe it's a male-female dynamic and the male socially has more systemic power, but also maybe he has financial control. So she doesn't have the same ability to meet her own needs independent of him, and he has the ability to affect her needs in the same way, in a more profound way, which means that it makes these situations a little bit more complex, a little bit more nuanced. So again, I was trying to find situations wherever I could, where I was trying to take a lot of these things out of the equation, just to simplify the examples, to make them a little easier to understand. And again, we talked about how the harm dynamic tends to be a little bit easier to spot, generally speaking, when these things are physical. But we've tried to also talk about we've tried to come up with some examples as well, that are not physically related, so that you can start to see, oh, this is what they're talking about when they talk about the harm dynamic, but in situations which aren't physical. So a lot of movie and TV examples involve actual harm, and we will talk about a couple of those in the examples that we're giving. But this is one of those situations where when the actual harm is happening, people can sometimes get confused with the drama triangle. And as we said in the episode where we talked about the harm dynamic, in these instances, the drama triangle is almost always also active, but the primary concern is the harm dynamic. We need to recognize and acknowledge and address and deal with that first, and then look at the drama triangle secondarily. The drama triangle often just indicates the motivation for the harm being done. Why are these things happening? Where are we coming from? What's the approach we're taking? And so again, like just these things that it's worth being aware of as we're going through these examples. So the final thing I want to say before we start getting into the actual movie examples is that often feel-good movies are often still drama triangle movies. And this is one of the things that, and like, this wasn't something that I was like, well, this is a thing. It was only through the conversation that we were having this morning that we realized that actually the empowerment ecosystem shows up in the most unexpected places. You want to see how unexpected? Stay until the end of the podcast. Our last example is going to be a surprising one. But also, so many of the movies that are feel-good movies, that are uplifting movies, are solidly centered around the drama triangle. And this is a lot of the reason that we have been conditioned to see the rescuer approach as a good thing, because it's positioned in a way to be seen as a good thing. Like if you imagine, like a lot of these movies, you end up with somebody in the victim approach, someone in the persecutor approach, and the rescuer comes in and makes everything great for about a split second. But that's the split second, almost normally the end of the movie. Like it's positioned to be seen as a good thing. We never see the consequences of it. We never see the flip side of it. And honestly, the empowerment ecosystem examples often show up in more, we say, like real life movies, as in like things that are a little bit more real to life. They're a little bit less fantastical. They're a little bit more just how life is, and
like true lived
yes.
experience.
And often, in a lot of ways, yes, there is some drama in there, but they're also often less dramatic as well. Like in how they are. I mean, yes, there might be dramatic things happening around them, but the actual characters, there's not a lot of drama associated with the characters that are engaging with the empowerment ecosystem. So
it was really surprising to see, like, because I was also like, Joe is a student of this work as well, my husband, and I was like, all right, you know, we talked about it on a previous episode. Claire took us through while he was going through the program, and it was like, here's an episode of this trashy reality show, watch this. And we were just, I mean, I can get down with some trashy TV just because of what we do. Like I always look at it from like that kind of learning perspective. He was fascinated. He's like, tell me more. And
right?
We were trying to figure out, we were like spitballing these ideas for this. And I was like, and where's the empowerment ecosystem? And where's the empowerment? And he's like, fuck. And I'm like, yeah, so much of like entertainment is just rooted in that drama triangle. And it was like,
Right.
it was really weird when we thought about it. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, there's going to be so many examples. And it was like, and the examples are not what I expected them to be. I think that's.
Yes. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that in addition, it came and it went. What did you were saying before the unexpected ones? The fact that the number of the fact there are very few examples of the empowerment ecosystem. Mm-hmm. You have to also bear in mind, part of the reason for that is because this is not life for the majority of people. Most people don't know about this. Most people don't approach life in this way. This is more indicator of how indoctrinated we are into the drama triangle way of doing things. The fact that these things are rare in fiction, like fiction's the place where you can make anything happen. I mean, technically, fiction's a great example of like creator approach because you can create whatever you want in a work of fiction. And even in that place, it's kind of remote to see it happening. So it's just something, just another example of like part of the reason that it's so important for us to be mindful about stepping into the empowerment ecosystem, because we're surrounded by this stuff all the time. It's very much our default mode, not because it's actually our default mode, but because we've been conditioned into doing it that way as a default. So we got a number of different examples, and with a lot of these examples, most of these examples are movies that are from a period ago, like they're from a while ago, because we wanted them to be movies that people are likely to have seen. And obviously the more up to date they are, maybe the less possibility there might be of that actually being more people have seen them. So the first one is a movie, I think it was from the 90s, called Fight Club. And again, we will try very hard not to put any spoilers into these descriptions, and some of them we can't help but with where we can, we will try our best to avoid spoilers so that if you haven't seen the movie, you can still go and enjoy it. If we're touching on a movie that you haven't seen and you don't want to hear about it until after you've watched it, we'll put the time codes for when we're starting and talking about each of the movies in the show notes so that you can figure out how to skip the section that you don't want to hear. So,
and we'll let you know. We'll also let you know if there's a spoiler alert.
Yes,
because some of them we don't need to.
Yes,
you don't need to know the entire thing. So we'll try to make it as easy as possible for you to not have a surprise spoiler.
And so with Fight Club, I don't think there's any spoilers in this, because there is all I will say is that there is a mental health element to the movie as a whole. And we're moving as far away from that as possible, because the second you bring that in, there's another layer to consider. There's more nuance with it. But towards the beginning of the movie, there is basically the main character is struggling with life, is probably the best way of describing it. And he ends up finding a random support group and going to this support group. And there's something about being at this support group that enables him to access his emotional experience and expression need. Like, he's able to cry and release in a way that he's not able to elsewhere.
And it was a support group that he didn't technically need.
That was the next piece I was coming to. So yes. So it's a support group for something that he is not a victim of. Like, he doesn't have the thing that they are going to be supported for. So in the context of this, he's actually in persecutor approach, because what he's doing is he's lying to and manipulating the people at these support groups to get his needs met, because he doesn't know any other way of doing it. And this is easy for him. And it's very easy in this to kind of feel like, oh, isn't this like a victimless crime kind of thing? Is somebody else really being harmed by that? But what happens is that when you're in these positions where you're being very vulnerable, you're sharing deeply about very intimate experiences, and you're creating bonds and trust with people, that trust is based on a lie, and therefore that undermining of that, and is absolutely a situation in which you are harming. So there is a harm dynamic here, where he is the harmer and these other people are the objective victims, and how he's approaching it is a victim approach.
And he's compromising the other person's security needs, correct? Like,
yes, absolutely. Yes, That's one of the ways in which the harm is being done. It's also, I would say he's also value need, because he's like not seeing their needs as being, like honesty as being important to these people. It's also personal power need, because he's removing their ability to choose whether they would still want to have that relationship with him if they knew the truth of who he was. There's a lot of things. This is what like we're so putting it in these contexts. This is where you can see there's actual harm being done to these other people's needs by this lie, even if they don't know that the lie is happening. So they're not aware of the harm, but the harm is being done. Now, the interesting thing is that what then ends up happening is that somebody else starts attending these support groups. So he starts off with this one support group, and before you know it, he's going to support groups for everything. And none of these are things that he needs any support for or a part of his lived experience. And then all of a sudden, another character, Marla, comes along and starts attending all of these support groups. And at this point, he switches to being in victim approach in relationship to her, because one, he knows that she knows that he doesn't have all these things. I mean, she obviously doesn't either, but but he knows that she knows that he's lying, and therefore that he's undermining. All of a sudden, there is a witness to the harm that is being done, and because she's not doing anything about it, she is a witness, not an intervener. But also her presence, because of his stuff, whatever that is, means that he no longer is able to cry, which is the release he was looking for by being in these support groups. So now, even though he is actually the harmer in the situation, he's approaching. Now, she is not actually harming him in this situation. There is not an objective harm. There is not an objective victimhood between her and him. But the interesting thing is, he is approaching it as the victim approach. He's seeing himself as the victim of her existence in these spaces. He's perceiving her as the persecutor approach. Because all of a sudden he's not able to meet his needs anymore, and he's blaming her for that, even though she's not doing anything to stop him. It's his stuff that is preventing him from doing that, which is probably the reason he couldn't do it in the first place without using these groups. But he's blaming her and perceiving himself as a victim. Now, the interesting thing is that they end up having an interaction at some point where they discuss this, and you can see he's like properly in the victim approach, like you can't do this, you can't show up, like I need this place and I can't do it, and then he jumps into the rescuer approach, trying to find a solution, because she says that she needs it too for a different reason, and she's also in a harm dynamic within that, and they're both doing their own harm. The interesting thing is that the harm is not between the two of them, like he is perceiving it as being. But then he jumps into the rescuer approach to try and rescue himself from the situation by trying to find a solution that enables him to still go to these groups and still continue doing the harming that he was doing as a vehicle to trying to get his own needs met. So he starts like trying to suggest, like, let's split them up. And then at one point it's like, oh, well, you can take this one. Oh no, I want that one. And then it's like, well, you can't take the whole brain at one point. They're like, because there's two different brain support groups that they're going to. And it's like, no, you can't have the whole brain. I want part of the brain. Like,
you can't have testicular cancer. Like, obviously I get to go to that one.
Exactly. But in doing that, he's trying to, he's not trying to rescue her. He's trying to rescue himself from the perceived persecutorhood of he's the perceived harm that he thinks she's doing to him, and that he is in the victim approach with relation to. And so the interesting thing is how he approaches it. He then becomes the persecutor approach to her and to himself. So there's this kind of bouncing around, because she's not actually doing actual harm. She's just existing, and his stuff is preventing him from getting his needs met. But because he then acts from that victim approach, and then acts from the persecutor approach, from the rescue approach, and then he bounces over to the persecutor. And there's this kind of bouncing back and forth that happens between him trying to pressure her into not going to these things, and then him dropping into this, well, you can't do that to me, I need this. And all of that is this drama triangle bouncing that happens on the regular in these kinds of situations. I mean, not that this is a very common situation, I hope. I don't know this specific example, but when the drama triangle is up, that maneuvering around it is very, very common.
Something that kind of came up while you were talking about that example is I could see some people being like, well, wasn't he in the creator approach if he's trying to figure out a way to make it both work for them? And the thing is, he has not stopped doing harm to the other people that are in that situation that we talked about earlier. So like, it's not
a self-first way of meeting needs. You have to be in a self-first way of meeting needs in order to be in creator approach.
Yes. It's not about just taking creative actions. It's about coming from the approach of being in self first, being in creator, and then moving from there. Because that's something early on I would have been like, oh, well, he's creating, like he's trying to make it work for both of them. And it's like, in that situation, but there is that circle of community that we talk about in the empowerment ecosystem that isn't being considered, which automatically puts it right back in that drama triangle or the harm dynamic.
Right.
Or the overlap.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And you literally just read my mind. That's exactly it, is that all of the positions in the empowerment ecosystem are mindful of community and the impact to them, to the community. So how we're engaging with those things is about recognizing that we have to do things in a way which is not going to negatively impact us and our needs, others and their needs, or the needs ecosystem, that community. And how they are doing that, which means that it's definitely not creator approach. And it's like, as you say, creator approach is not just coming up with ideas that work for you and doing them. It's about coming up with ideas that work for you and doing them that are also in alignment with the community and the self-first approach. So that's example number one. Now we're going back in time, she says. So our next example because we're going back to the 80s to Back to the Future. So again, Back to the Future is a very popular movie franchise, and it wasn't a simple one to look at because, again, while a lot of the people involved in the shooting were adults, they were representing high school children. Like Michael J. Fox's character, Marty McFly, when he goes back in time, he ends up interacting with his parents, but while they are in high school. So most of the dynamics that are happening there are happening between children. Even when you kind of it's called Back to the Future. Again, I don't think this is too many spoilers that are happening, but even when you start looking at what's happening when you're in the 1985, it basically starts off in 1985, goes back to 1955. So in 1985, even what's happening with his parents, so there are interactions with his parents and other people that are adult to adult, but a lot of those interactions, there is another power dynamic involved, i.e. there is like a boss, a subordinate dynamic. So it's not as clear cut, which is why we didn't want to talk about that. But there is a good example in here of the harm dynamic. And I wanted to put this in here because while the harm dynamic is like all of these, we want to really focus on them from an adult perspective. It doesn't mean to say that the person being harmed can't be a child, because that is still a possibility. And that is still important to name, note, and address. So the example of this is Strickland, the principal. Like an example of actual harm being done, and the persecutor approach combined is the principal, where he is verbally abusing the kids at the school to try to get his own needs met. I mean, he's not going, hey kids, this is why I'm doing this. Like just looking at this and understanding these dynamics, that's why he's doing it. He's probably got low self-worth. He probably feels like there's a number of words that kind of come to mind, but I
find an appropriate one.
Insecure little man who doesn't have any other way to feel good about himself, and so what he does is he tries to exert power over the people who he's actually responsible for taking care of in order to feel good about himself, to feel powerful, to feel important, to feel all of those things. And so that's a good example. And I wanted to put that in there because, yes, while there are children involved in the example, the responsibility is the adults, and the ability to change it is the adults. And the kids in the situation are just the ones who are the objective victim in the situation. And so it's really important to recognize that that is a possibility that this can come up, where children are a part of these shapes in an appropriate, and we're viewing that in an appropriate way.
Would you say if you're trying to take the piss out of a child, then you're automatically in the harm dynamic and almost certainly in the the drama triangle as well?
So this is one of those situations where I think that language is important here. When you say taking the piss out of, what do you mean? Because I think that might mean something really different in the UK versus the US.
Oh,
there may be nuance in it.
There's kind of a totality in that statement that might not be the best for blanketing, but like it could be right. Like literally like abusing a child, like physically.
If you are verbally abusing a child, yes. I think that one of the things, I think that the reason that there's nuance in this is that, and I mean, to be honest, I think that, I mean, even though I think that sometimes the how the definition might change, I think that ultimately when you're talking about taking the piss out, what you're actually talking about is sometimes making jokes at the expense of, and actually we're going to get to that example in a minute.
And that's the other, like, that was the other side of kind of that taking the piss out coin. And that's more what I meant. Like, there's so many times that I've seen parents, caregivers, adults in general, that take a shot at a child.
Yes.
That, like,
yes.
And it's like, yeah, so maybe, like, it's just,
if you are, and again, go back to what the harm dynamic is. The objective victim is somebody whose needs are negatively impacted by the person in the harmer position. If you are making a dig at your child's expense, if you are making a quote unquote joke, by the way, not jokes, not funny, at your child's expense, if you are doing something which is highlighting a weakness that they have, or doing something that is undermining their sense of, like, if you do anything that undermines their sense of security, their sense of being loved and supported, their sense of acknowledgement, their sense of value, their sense of personal power, if you do anything to undermine any of those things, which I think is that, like, kind of through thread of the kind of taking the piss, even though that it can take many different forms. I just wanted to make sure we were understanding fully what we were saying. I think taking the piss normally, like in the UK, that would be making a joke at the expense of, like, that's a kind of shorthand for it. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. But I think anything that undermines any of those needs, you're in the harm dynamic, period.
Well, children or adults. But
yes, absolutely. Yes. And yes. And when it comes to other adults, if you haven't already listened to it, go and listen to the Only Thing That You Owe Other People episode. The one thing you owe them is not negatively impacting their needs. So you shouldn't be doing that anyway. When it comes to children who you are the caregivers of, it is your responsibility to protect and support their needs. So not only is it like, yeah, we don't want to negatively impact their needs, because we don't want to negatively impact anyone's needs, because when we do that, we negatively impact our own. But it's actually your job, your role, and your responsibility to support and protect their needs. So if you are doing that to your child or a child who is in your care, then the harm is being amplified than it would be with an adult. It's still not okay. It's still the harm dynamic. But I just wanted to, like, no, that's the thing. Like, you should be feeding and nourishing those needs rather than draining them. So, and actually, perfect segue on to another general example of harm being done. And this is one that I think some people may be a little uncomfortable with, because this is something that a lot of people probably engage with. So this example is any kind of comedy. So if you think about stand-up, you think about comedy that actually happens in movies, in TV shows, on podcasts, on social media, any kind of comedy that punches down. And what we mean by that is comedy that gets a laugh at the expense of another person, i.e. at the expense of one or more of their universal needs. So in this situation, the comedian is in the harm position. They are negatively impacting the needs of the people they're telling the jokes at the expense of. So this would potentially negatively affect their value need, i.e. like this being seen as they're less important. So it's okay for me to make a joke. It's okay for me to benefit my needs by getting a joke and getting a laugh that makes me feel good about myself by using them as a tool for doing that. The second you do that, you're diminishing their value need. Probably their emotional experience and expression need, because they're probably going to have some feelings about it. Maybe even their security need. So if you have somebody who is like at a live stand-up show, and the comedian does this punch down joke, and this person thinks that they are the only person in the auditorium that joke is actually about, and actually is going to negatively impact, they may feel unsafe, especially if the entire room starts laughing. It could be like, oh, I could be like, talk about movies. I got the quote from Ghost in my head. Molly, you in danger, girl. Like that's what I got. Like, it's like, oh shit, like I'm not safe here. I'm surrounded by people who think I'm less than, I'm a punchline. Like, that's not okay. And the comedian in that situation, go on.
it's not necessarily just a person. It can be a group of, it can be an entire
Yes.
marginalization, an entire group of people, and you just happen to identify with that.
Yes, exactly.
Group. So it doesn't have to be like,
absolutely,
because some comics will punch down and specifically be like,
oh,
you
yeah, you're wearing
in
a
the
stupid
front
shirt,
row,
da, 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 whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you're right. And actually, I think it's even more common to be doing it about groups of people and to make a generalization where there is a comedic punch down on an entire group of people. And so that comedian is also in the persecutor approach, because what they're doing is they are approaching the situation to try to meet their needs by costing the needs of somebody else's. Now, the bit that might be a little uncomfortable to you listening to this at home is that the audience is in the witness position. Now, if you are paying attention, the witness position is the position that is an extension of the harmer position, because the witness is also doing harm by being complicit in the harm being done. Because what they are doing is not only are they giving this kind of permissibility to the person who is doing it and in effect saying, it's okay, like, this isn't a problem, but they provide an environment of permissibility for that harm to be done. They make it socially acceptable. So it's not just that they're making it acceptable for the person who is doing it. They're letting everybody else in that space know this kind of joke is okay, it's acceptable. And therefore, they are in the witness position. So the person who is, who the joke is, like joke, and I use the term very loosely, is at the expense of, is the victim of the harm being done. And how they respond to that could mean that they're either in the victim approach or the creator approach. So if they're in the victim approach, it could be like, oh God, poor me. I want someone to come in and rescue me from this. I'm powerless to do anything. There's nothing I can do. I've just got to sit here and take it. And this is awful and blah, blah, blah. The creator approach, again, thinks about what its outcome, what is the outcome, like what are the and what are the ways I could create that. So the outcome might be, I want to get away from this. I don't feel comfortable here, so I'm going to remove myself from the situation. It might be about setting a boundary. It could be just leaving the venue. It may be that the outcome is, I want to hold this person accountable. I mean, you could heckle them for the crowd. You may not feel comfortable doing that. It may be that you want to write to them afterwards and let them know, this is like, I need you to know this is not okay. This is going to negatively impact people. You might make a post on social media educating people as to why this comedy is a problem. And you might start a petition to try and convince the comedian to change their material or to request the venues not to work with them. There's lots of options available. But the key thing is like, even though you are the objective victim in that situation, how you approach dealing with being an objective victim can either put you in the drama triangle or the empowerment ecosystem. And it may be that actually you one of the things you do is you don't know how to do this by yourself. So from the creative position, my outcome is, I want some help in figuring out how to do this. So maybe I go to go to somebody else as the contributor approach to be like, hey, I could use your help figuring this out. Or I go, in the supporter approach, or you go to the contributor approach to be like, hey, is this something would you be willing to put a post up on social media if I give you the text, or would you be willing to write to call the venue for me or something like that? Because sometimes it can be easier for somebody who's not been the person who's been directly impacted to have those conversations. And it also then it means that person isn't in the firing line for whatever the potential backlash could be for them having those conversations. So you then have the intervener. If somebody intervenes by calling out the joke or comedian, again, depending on how and why they're doing it, it could be the supporter, the contributor, or the rescue approach. So if they're coming in going like, I want to be the knight in shining armor here, I'm gonna fix this situation. That's the rescue approach. They're trying to get their needs met, which puts the other person in the victim approach position comparatively, puts the other person in the persecutor approach. Nothing good is going to come from that. If, however, they go into that creator approach, what do I want to create right now? I want to support this person next to me. And again, maybe it's like we talked about a couple of episodes ago with like, if there's a instance of aggression on a train or like verbal abuse or that's happening, you could sit next to them and you could talk to the person and be like, hey, you okay? Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Like, what do you want to do? It may be that they actually do something by, they maybe can't do it in that moment, or they may be unable to do it in that moment, or don't feel safe to do it in that moment. Because again, if you're the only woman in a room full of men, it makes a different situation. But maybe the intervention happens afterwards. So it's like, I'm going to write to the comedian. I'm going to speak to the venue. I'm going to do these things because it's what I believe is the right thing to do. I'm going to check in with my friend and make sure that this is, or the person I know, this is what I would like to do. Like, I'm just checking, is there anything I'm missing? Like, I want this to be supportive. And when these sorts of situations happen, people tend to see these instances as like cancel culture. And that's just, cancel culture is a buzzword that's been created to put pressure on people to not have others experience the consequence of their actions. What we're actually experiencing is consequence culture, which is that when somebody does something, there are consequences to that. They may be free to say whatever they want, but they're not free from experiencing the consequences of them saying or doing whatever they want.
I know something that was kind of, I don't want to say difficult to grasp, but it was uncomfortable to grasp. Especially Claire and I both love comedy. Like we enjoy comedy shows when they are not at the expense of other people, and they don't have to be funny. And that's the thing.
Right.
There was a point before I started the journey with this work where I was like, I was a case study. Like, I seriously was on this kind of stuff.
True.
And there was a lot that was inappropriate. I'm like, well, that's not hurting anybody. And I was making a note as she was talking about this. And something that comes up a lot is, if I'm not part of the marginalization that's being punched down to, but I recognize it when I'm like, that wasn't necessary. That didn't need to be said like that, or to that group or whatnot. Like, I'm very aware of it with other people now. Something that's come up in, sometimes they bring it up in their comedy shows, but also after the fact is, if they're punching down, and a lot of time it's kind of like a relationship example, whether it's familial or an intimate partner or something like that. And they're like, oh, this joke is about my cousin, wife, husband, next door neighbor, somebody that they're in relationship with. They're okay with this. They're aware that I'm doing this joke, and they're still punching down on that person. And it's like, even if that person says they're okay with it, are they really okay with it? Or are they just in the conditioning of having to say they're okay because it's not worth what comes out if they say that they're not okay with it? But even if they think they're okay with it, that is taking a dig and impacting their needs negatively, regardless of what anybody thinks is going on. If somebody is punching down in that sense, you're going to be impacted. And there's a third element to this as well, which is that in addition to that, what it does is it creates this environment of permissibility for that kind of punching down, quote unquote, humor in the wider society. Yeah, it's like, it's like if this one person says it's okay, but in actual fact, the quote joke, or humor is like rooted in misogyny, which a lot of the times it is. Like, this is that's a very, very common example. It creates this air of permissibility. It was like, well, that one woman might be okay with it, but what you're doing is you're letting all the other men know that it's okay to do that about women. And the other women, trust me, are not okay with it. There's a lot of other women out there who are not okay with it. And then when you start to do, I mean, I've seen it with comedians in the LGBTQ community who are part of the community, and they've punched down on other members of the community. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Wait, yeah.
No, stop. Like, that's not, like, it's no better when you do it to them as it was when other people used to do it about the group that you identify with as part of that community. And it's like, again, you're creating permissibility around that humor, around those topics for other people. And so it's like, and this is the thing, is that I think that these kind of like comedy of this nature is really lazy. Like, there's so much you can do with observational humor. There's so much you can do. There's so many clever things, and there's so many of the comedians that I really enjoy. I mean, it's got to the point now where I can't watch certain comedians anymore because I'm like, it's just not funny to me, because I know that that's problematic, and I know it's harmful to people, and I can't enjoy it anymore because it's taken any potential enjoyment out of it to know the harm that that's doing. it's also helped me to find other comedians who don't punch down. Which, and the other thing is like, and this is a bit more nuanced. There's also like, because when you're talking about punching down, also punching down, a lot of the time is when there is a power dynamic involved, and the person who is doing the punching has more privilege than the person who is not doing the punching. There's also a version of this, which is punching up. That's way more nuanced. And I'm not going to say that's not okay. That is okay. It's very circumstances specific, because sometimes art and comedy being a version of art is some of the way that we start to break through these systems of oppression and start to create shifts and changes that are necessary. So it's like, I want to kind of mention that, but also go, well, that person's doing that at that person's expense. Well, yeah, but they don't have any social power. And they are doing the thing, because sometimes what needs to happen is, in order to rectify the imbalance, we have to close the imbalance. And that's sometimes one of the ways to do it. I'm not saying it's the best way of doing it. I'm not saying it's the right way of doing it. I'm just saying that situation is very nuanced and not something I'm going to touch with a 10-foot barge pole today.
I would put something else in your poll's peripheral. Touch it.
Okay.
Touch it if you choose. Something that just came to me. What about when comedians punch themselves?
Okay. Yes. So self-deprecating humor. And this is, again, a very, very common pattern, both with comedians and also just in day-to-day life. When I witness self-deprecating humor, I tend to, for me, the perception and the experience that I've had with most people is it is an indicator of unmet needs, especially an unmet value need. And it's like, I'm going to try and put myself down to try to make other people laugh, to try to meet my needs. But in putting myself down, I've compromised my needs. So the interesting thing is that within that situation, in terms of the drama triangle, you're all three positions at the same time. You're the victim of the humor. You are the persecutor who is trying to get their needs met through creating the humor of which you are the victim of. And you are trying to rescue yourself from having your unmet needs by using the humor to try to meet needs that it is a clusterfuck, quite frankly. And
we've talked about it before. A lot of comedians are very messy in their shapes.
Yes,
because
and
of that.
Again, it's not necessary. Like if like I think that's the thing, is that if someone came to me and said, okay, Claire, I need you to explain to me about needs, but you can't use this specific type of metaphor that you've used before. If I don't know needs well enough to be able to come up with 3 other metaphors or examples or ways of explaining it that don't use that metaphor, I don't really know my subject matter very well. If you're a comedian and you don't know how to be funny without compromising yourself or somebody else, maybe there's a little bit more learning to do there. That is all I'm saying. Like, there are ways of doing it, and there are comedians who do it. And part of the problem is, I think that when it was more socially acceptable to do these things, people created a brand and a platform based on a certain kind of humor. And now all of a sudden they're like, well, I have to keep doing it because it's the thing people like me for. And then all of a sudden it's not, they're getting cancelled for it, but they don't know how to do anything else. And it's like, again, you need to be able to go into creator approach. What do I want? What's my outcome? I want to be put on a really damn good show. I mean, you want a really good example of like bucking the trend and how it can work spectacularly in terms of boosting your success. You look at Hannah Gadsby and the show Nannette. So Hannah Gadsby had been a comedian for many years and had done particular kinds of humor, a lot of self-deprecating humor. And I'm not saying that her comedy is perfect at all. That's not what I'm saying in the slightest. But with Nannette, and again, I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. About half to 2/3 of the way, like it seems like a normal comedy show for about half to 2/3 of the way through it. And then the final third to like a half of it is like mind blown. She steps outside of the comedic like the general comedic patterns. She approaches telling her stories in a different way. It's a different form of art. That shit blew the fuck up. Like, that went global. And in fact, the interesting thing is she made it her retirement show. She was going to retire because she was doing a form of comedy that she said herself, it was harming her to do the comedy. She was getting the laughs at her own expense. And she decided that she was going to retire, and she was going out with a bang, and she was going to say why she was doing it, how she was doing it, and she was going to lay everything out there. And it was so fucking successful that she came back and she's like, well, I can't retire now. Like, you've obviously told me there's something in this that you want. And even like if you watch her, that Nannette, and then you watch her the second show after that, or the second, like I said, she'd been doing comedy for a long time. But the comedy special she did after that was called Douglas. And at the beginning, like, I mean, it was fucking genius how she wrote that show, because she wrote the show basically going, people love Nannette. You can't repeat Nannette. There is no way to do it. So she comes up front and goes, if you haven't seen Nannette, okay. If you did see, what the hell are you here for? I don't have any trauma left in the tank. Like, sorry. Like, but she pre-frames the entire show to set the expectations so that people aren't disappointed that it's not another Nannette. And she showed her comedy props in how she pivoted from the end of Nannette into Douglas, and then beyond and into the comedy special that comes after. I can't remember what it's called. But it's so much about like joy and love. And it's like the antithesis of what she'd been doing up to that point. But people love it. And it just goes to show, just because you've done what you've always done doesn't mean to say you have to continue that. And you could create, she was expected to retire. That was it. She was done. And she became an almost overnight global sensation as a result of completely going off piste.
Just because it works doesn't mean it's good. Like, in that sense with the comedy. Like,
I would say just because it worked, like past tense, doesn't mean to say it still works. And doesn't mean to say there isn't a better way of doing it. And just because you can get, I mean, you can get like, if you imagine you've got like 100 people in a room, if you get 20 of them to laugh, well, I mean, technically you've got a laugh. But if you get 99 of them to laugh, I mean, if you get 20 of them to laugh, but 50 of them want to walk out because they find what you've done offensive, is that really a win? And you get 99 of them to laugh without anyone wanting to walk out. That's a far better way of doing it. And I'm not saying that's what's possible, but like, you're always going to have people who, like, comedy is subjective. Different people find different things funny. And if you're doing it in a way which negatively impacts somebody else, you're actually negatively impacting yourself, even if you don't know it. So on to the next example. So this one, trigger warning. We're going to talk about a movie called Promising Young Woman. There is a trigger warning for sexual assault, revenge. I mean, it's not really revenge porn, but like there's a viral element. It's a very triggering movie to especially to women and people who don't identify as men. I highly recommend. I think every single person on the planet should watch this movie, quite frankly. So it's a way to understand the societal dynamics that play out regarding issues of sexual assault and issues of the dynamics that surround it. The basic premise is that, and if you've seen I'm not spoiling anything by telling you this. This is the one where there's a little bit of a mini spoiler in here. I'm not going to give away the whole thing, and I'm not giving away anything I'm not going to give away much that's going to have you be like, oh, I wish I didn't know that. There's a couple of big twists in there that I'm not going to touch. So there's still interesting stuff about this, even with the things I'm going to say. But the basic premise you would see from the trailer is that this woman basically pretends to be drunk or drugged, and like she can't make decisions, and there's always a quote unquote nice guy who helps her to get home, and in almost every instance the nice guy then tries to assault her, and it gets to a certain point, and then she reveals that she is in fact not drunk or drugged. She has
Incapacitated.
her full faculties incapacitated. Thank you. She there's a turning of the tables in that moment, and all of a sudden these people who they see themselves as a nice guy and they want everyone else to see them as a nice guy, things switch up. So there is a scene towards the end of the movie, and one of the things, part of the reason she does this is because her best friend was sexually assaulted by somebody. But not only were they sexually assaulted by somebody, it was done in front of witnesses. And there was a video that was taken of it that was then spread around to a number of different people. So let's break this down. This is the harm dynamic, plain and simple. Let's start there. It's the most important focus. The person doing the sexual assault is the harmer. Easy. The person being assaulted is the objective victim. Every one of those people who saw it and did nothing are witnesses, as in terms of the harm dynamic. They are doing harm by being complicit in it. And that includes all the people who saw the video, all the people. Now, I can see people going, well, if I saw the video and it was after the fact, I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't stop it from happening. No, but you could still have intervened in the wider situation. You could have submitted it to the police. You could have there's a number of things you could do to address the situation, even though you couldn't have done anything in that moment. Now, there's a scene towards the end of the movie where one of the witnesses is confronted and faced with his involvement. He's one of the witnesses, and he's seen on the video, so you know that it's him and that he was there. And he's confronted and faced with his involvement ruining family relationships, friendships, his career. And he spirals through the drama triangle so fast, while also becoming the harmer to the person he's talking to through coercive control and manipulation that negatively impacts her needs. So it starts off with, don't think I'm a bad person. I love you. You've got to forgive me. Now, it's interesting how, like, you've got to forgive me thing. I think that some people might go, well, that's victim approach, right? Like, I'm the victim, you have to forgive me. Actually, it's persecutor approach, because this is somebody trying to manipulate the other person into seeing him as okay and a good guy and forgiving him, even though he harmed her friend. He then moves on to, so you're perfect, you've never done anything to feel ashamed of. Different form of persecutor approach, different flavor, which is like, I'm going to try and make myself look like a good guy by making you a bad guy too. So we're on the same level. Like, I'm trying to absolve my guilt by making you out to be a bad person as well. Then, because she's like, there's something that she wants from him in return for not revealing the video and his involvement in it. And he says, this was the one that got me. I got to say, I don't know if I can live with the threat of this hanging over me. Like, the ignorant nature of that statement. It's okay for her to live with what's happened to her friend, with her friend to live but you can't live with the threat of there being consequences to the choices and actions that you took. In this, he's dropping into the victim approach. He's trying to bait her into rescuing him and not sharing what she knows, because at the moment he's perceiving that she's the persecutor approach. She's threatening to do this to him. And he's like, if I can pull down even further into the victim approach, maybe I can make her feel bad enough to jump in and rescue me from the threat of the thing that she's saying that she might do. The next one, classic line in so many of these situations, I didn't even do anything. Now, this is a classic witness statement in the harm dynamic. This is another persecutor approach behavior. This denial of responsibility is a form of manipulation. That he's trying to manipulate her into believing that because he didn't actively sexually assault this person, he didn't do anything wrong. He's also kind of blurring into the victim approach here, suggesting that he's being blamed for something that isn't his fault and that somehow he's the victim in this situation. And all of this is not recognizing that he was there, he saw it happen, and he did nothing to stop it from happening, even though he had the social power in that moment to be able to do it. He was the witness. He was acting in that harmful. He was also harming the victim in that moment. He was a harmer as well as a victim. he was a harmer as well as a witness to the victim. And then, so this is what often happens in these situations when somebody is cornered, and they realize there's kind of no way out. That what they will do is they will cycle through these super quickly. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to find something that is going to either meet their needs or mask the unmet needs. So they're going to cycle through as many different variations of these things. They might just stay purely in victim approach, but we gave you a list of all the different, not all of the different, but a lot of different ways of the victim approach, because they could go through 6, 8, 12 of those, just trying different things to try and get you to do it. Same thing can happen in this situation with the persecutor approach. And what's happening is that this guy is bouncing from persecutor approach to victim approach, persecutor approach, victim approach, to try and get her to do something. And then the final thing he says before she walks out of the room is, "You fucking failure." Now, this is the point where he realizes he doesn't have the power to get her to do what he wants her to do. So what he's going to do is he's going to try and take the power back by bullying and mistreating her in order that he can feel like he's in the persecutor approach and she's in the victim approach. The interesting thing is he doesn't take her power away. And that the whole thing is like I wouldn't say it's a nuance about where she's at in various instances and how she chooses to engage with the things that she does. So I'm not going to say that she's fully in the empowerment ecosystem. But I think that's like, he doesn't have the ability to manipulate her. And it's so interesting because you look at this and you're like, how many other people have you done this to? Like, this is a pattern of behavior that would show up in any situation where somebody is doing something you don't want them to do.
Oftentimes this pattern happens so quickly that the person, like, unless you're kind of aware of this stuff and utilizing it on a daily basis and consistently, like when it happens and it happens so quickly, I've witnessed situations where there's somebody in that harm dynamic, and this is witness situations not as a witness in the harm dynamic necessarily, but somebody's telling me about a situation that happened, and I'm like following the person they're talking about, and I'm like, oh, victim, persecutor, rescuer, victim, persecutor, victim, and my brain is like, wow, they are going so fast that like it's hard to keep up. There's an element, I think, whether consciously or unconsciously, of confusing the other person that's in the situation, the objective victim, to the point where they don't know what's going on. They don't know what they're feeling. Like, this person is like trying to rescue them. Then they're of different emotions, and like, think we have to process these things. And if somebody's quick firing and then quick firing from different positions, like, that is beyond dizzying, and it's so common. Common.
Absolutely. And there's like, this is, I said, this was just one interaction where it was so obvious, and it's so obvious that he's in the wrong. And he still sees himself as a nice guy. He still thinks he did nothing wrong. He's like even in these, like, and this is where this kind of self-identity that we have, this self-perception of who we believe ourselves to be, is so powerful, because it will try everything to make us seem like that to everybody else, and to make us seem like that to ourselves. It will convince us of stuff that is utter bullshit to still believe that we are a quote unquote good person, without recognizing that actually being a decent human being is the most important thing. And being a decent human being means being able to own a name. I fucked up. That was not okay. And taking responsibility for those things and moving into that place where we are actually making things right or doing what we can. And there are sometimes like you can't do anything about it with the situation that happens. So you go and apply yourself to doing, like, putting good into the world in other places, and maybe contributing to help other victims of the same sort of thing, or being a part of educating people who are the harmers in that situation, to try, like, there's so many things that you can do. And like, it's that this is one of those things where the ego, it blocks people from seeing who they really are. And that ego is the thing that it causes so much harm, because we don't see it ourselves. We see ourselves as we want to be, not as who we are. And it's only through seeing ourselves as we are and owning who we are that we can actually step into the empowerment ecosystem. So there's another kind of element to this that like came up when we were talking about this beforehand, which is the kind of viral culture, the viral nature of our society, and the fact that we see these videos of these awful things that happen that go viral across the globe within a matter of sometimes seconds, minutes, hours, days. And like Serena was kind of asking me, like, what do you think about that in terms of like this whole the shapes and the drama triangle and the harm dynamic and everything. And as with most things, my response, of course, was nuance. There's a lot of nuance associated with this. So like, for example, if you are like, one of the things that Serena was you'd mentioned earlier was like, if you're the person who maybe you didn't post it or you didn't share it on someone, but maybe you showed somebody, like, where does that fall in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, check this. Did you see this, rather than
yes, I'm gonna put it,
doing
I'm gonna
something
send it in a
to
text
make
message
it so
to
nobody
you.
could see it. Like,
right. Well, and again, but it's like with all of these things, there's so much nuance in it, because it's like, why are you sharing it? What is the purpose of you sharing it? So it's like, if you are trying to do this as a way of, again, like punching down against the victim, being like, did you see this? Can you see what she got herself into? Like, it's such a disgrace, all of those sorts of things. Completely harmer, completely harm dynamic. Because you are then adding to the harm to this, the person, the objective victim.
I'd also say, like, entertainment and fascination come from the harm dynamic too with that, because there's a lot of times, like, there was an instance where there was a picture posted online of one of my friends, their close family, and the family was trying to have this picture removed for various reasons, and it kept popping up. So like, if I was to take that picture and then show somebody, be like, oh my gosh, did you see this? With no other, like, there was no need for me to share that picture to direct anybody. It was my creator approach was porn. To that exactly.
And that's
Thank
not
you.
Creator approach, because again, like I want to get, I'm getting a buzz, or I'm getting some kind of benefit, whether that is, look, I'm the person who's introduced you to these things, or look at these things and I'm seeing the shock in somebody else and I get a kick out of seeing other people shocked, or I'm entertained by that. All of those sorts of things, that is all us trying to meet our needs at the cost of the victim, the objective victim, which means that we actually become the harmer, because the second we are engaged in doing it, we're in the harmer position. If we are the witness, we are complicit in the harm that is being done. Now, I said nuance, because it depends on why you are sharing it. Because if, for example, you show somebody to be like, have you seen this? We need to do something about this. Like, I need to show somebody in a position of authority who can do something about this. Or I'm sharing it so that people are like, maybe it's something that is pretty much a secret and people aren't aware it's happening, so that they can't, so nobody's doing anything about it because it's a secretive thing. Like, maybe I'm sharing it so that it will get more visibility, so that somebody will do something about it, so we can get to people who will be able to do something about it. Like, if you're coming at it from that point of view, you're more likely to be coming from the creator approach. Now, if you are sharing something that the victim, objective victim, or victim's family, who are also potentially objective victims, if depending on the circumstances of the situation, have specifically asked you not to, even if you're doing it because you want to and you think you're doing the right thing, you think you're doing good, if they have specifically said to not do that and you do it, you are negatively compromising their needs, so you are in the harmer position. So this is about, like, all of this is like, this is what I mean, there's a lot of nuance around this. Like, the key thing is to think about, what can you do in this situation? If you're focused on what can I do to hold this person accountable, to get justice, to have this person be believed, to amplify the problem so we can do something about it, to try and create systemic change, if that's where it's coming from and you're doing it in a self-first way, which is not negatively impacting somebody else's needs. And aside here, just a quick little note, it is not negatively impacting somebody else's needs to enable them to face the consequences of their choices. To do otherwise would be protecting somebody from the consequence of their choices, which puts you in rescuer approach, which puts them in victim approach, which then puts you in persecutor approach. It's all messy. But like, it's like, because I can see people going like, oh, well, this person made one mistake and he had a promising career ahead of him. And it's like that, like, it's not negatively impacting their needs to have them face the consequences of the actions that they have taken. That is not the same thing. That is them experiencing their consequences, and then they can make decisions in the context of those consequences. To protect them from that is you are coddling you actually become a harmer in that situation, because you are coddling the harmer, which further harms the victim.
And if the harmer didn't want to be in that position, or if they were a good person and they fucked up, like, if they own that, and then like they have that ability to move forward to prove that what you thought of them was actually the truth. When she said, like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's basically, I think what you're saying is that like there's like a lot of people want to avoid consequences. And so what they do is they try and pretend it didn't happen, as opposed to like, if what you're talking about here is like, people think that making a mistake makes you a bad person. Making a mistake doesn't make you a bad person. What indicates your character is what you do when you make a mistake. And that's what you're saying, is that in that situation where you maybe have made a mistake or an accident has happened, it's like how you approach that, take responsibility, hold yourself accountable, do things to address, to make amends, all of that. That's the thing that shows your character, that shows who you really are. Okay, so now we're going to move into a few examples. We've got 3 examples of the empowerment ecosystem. They're very random. They're very unexpected in a lot of ways, especially the last one. So the next one, I'm going to say to Serena, it's okay if you close your ears for this one. I know that she's not a fan of the actor who's in this movie, but it was a good example, so I really wanted to give it. So the next movie we're going to talk about, back to the 90s, is The Matrix. So this is a situation in which I tried to stay within the context of the things that actually happened. When you get into sort of sci-fi and fantasy and all those sorts of things, it starts to then, because you're warping reality, sometimes it can warp our understanding of what's going on. But when you look at the period leading up to the point at which Neo is unplugged from the Matrix, and if you haven't seen it, he's unplugged from the Matrix, you won't know what that means yet. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Go and watch it. I know you haven't seen it, but we're going to rectify that at some point. So anyway, so in that, like when they're interacting prior to that point in time, it's a great example of supporter and creator mode. Morpheus and the team of people who he was working with were giving information to Neo and left breadcrumbs for him to follow, but it was always his choice. So what they were doing is they were providing information, which is one of the ways that you can come from the supporter approach. But it was his decision. A lot of the time, Trinity and Morpheus, who were like the closest to him, would ask questions or remind him of questions he's already asking himself. Like at one point, Trinity said, like you know the question, like it's the one you've been seeking the answer to, and he responds, "What is the Matrix?" So he's like they're reminding him of the things that he already knows, or of information he already knows, or like of kind of questions he's asking himself, or of information he already knows. They're providing the ability for him to make the choice. But the key thing is Neo was always given the choice, and that kind of like iconic scene where Morpheus gives him the choice between the red pill and the blue pill. And like it's like, and he says to him, like, if you take the red pill, this will happen. If you take the blue pill, this will happen. Like it's not like he's like trying to tempt him into doing it or trying to force him to have one. He's basically giving him a choice. He was in supporter role. Neo taking that choice was him choosing to be in creator approach. He was saying, I'm going to choose this. What is my outcome? Like, so take it back. Creator approach. What is my outcome? My outcome was trying to find out what is the Matrix. I've got 2 options in front of me. This one's going to give me answers. This one's not going to give me answers. So here are my options. I've got 2 options. Here's the option that's going to help me move closer to that. I mean, I think it was a little more involved than he had anticipated. But that was the thing, is that all like that at that point in the movie, and I said, it gets a little bit more blurred lines when you start to warp reality and all the high drama stuff that's good for entertainment figures and not good for understanding the shapes that we're talking about. But at this point in the process, it's a really clear indicator of what supporter and creator approaches can look like. So the next example we have, we're going completely left field now, is The Lion King. So yes, this is an animated movie. Yes, they are animals, but but interestingly enough, I said to Serena, I actually went through the movie and looked for the point at which they were adults within the movie. So we're still looking at adult to adult situations. We're not looking at those kind of blurring the lines of child dynamics, even if the child is an animated lion. At the end of the movie, Simba goes into this Hakuna Matata phase. And again, I'm not going to spoil it as to why this terrible thing has happened. And he's run away from home, and he meets these two characters, Timon and Pumbaa, and they teach him about Hakuna Matata, which basically means no worries. And so that's their way of dealing with things. Now, the interesting thing is that he ends up in victim approach, and actually they're in victim approach as well, because that Hakuna Matata thing, it's not a way of addressing what's happened, facing it and healing it. It's a way of avoiding it. It's like Hakuna Matata in this context is what we would call a thought terminating cliche. And we'll get into that more in previous episodes. No, we're not going to get into more previous, in future episodes. We're going to get into that more. But a thought terminating cliche is an avoidance strategy. It's a way of halting critical thinking. And when we're halting our critical thinking, we're also going to halt our ability to be in creator mode and our ability to heal. And so what ends up happening is it's just an avoidance strategy. It's something to try and distract from the discomfort of what we're feeling versus facing it, healing it, and growing and moving on. So he's in this victim approach because he's avoiding what's happened to avoid feeling the consequences of it. And in doing so, he's avoiding a lot of his wider responsibilities. He's also in self-blaming mode. Like, he's blaming himself for what happened, even though it wasn't his fault. And then there's this part of this movie where Rafiki, who is, I think he's actually a baboon. He's like a, go ahead.
Before you get into the Rafiki
Yes.
aspect, I just want to kind of point out, I don't know if it was at the beginning of this episode or if it was in the last episode that we started talking about the fact that even these feel-good movies, like, there's that element of the drama triangle in Hakuna Matata. Like, people, like, that is toxic positivity at its finest, really. And people think of that scene when they're like walking and dancing and they're all singing as a jovial, like, that has
enjoyable,
to be good,
yes,
green, like the empowerment
that's
dynamic.
How you should
and
be wanting to do things.
And it's solidly rooted in that red. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, because a lot of people be like, how are they saying this happy-go-lucky scene? And it's like,
well, and the thing about it is it's how all of these things, and this is the power of movies, which is incredibly scary in a lot of ways, because if Hakuna Matata had been this kind of dark, foreboding music associated with it, it would have been like, if it means no worries, like, you know what I mean? Like, you'd be like, oh fuck, that doesn't sound good at all.
Scar was singing it.
Right, exactly. Who's one of the villainous characters in The Lion King, if you haven't seen it. And so it's like how the ebb and the flow of the storyline goes. It's how the art in terms of the composition of the like they're walking, like how they're walking, the fact that they've got like the sun rising and setting behind them, the music that goes with it, like I would say the choreography, but like it is kind of, it's animated, but it's animated choreography. Like all of those things combine to give us this kind of rush of feel good hormones, because we associate all of those things. Like I saw something ages ago where somebody was taking these things that are seen as positive, and the second that you change the like the tone or the sound associated with it, it's very different. Like it's the difference between, I saw one the other day, it was not quite the same thing, but it was like, have a nice day versus make the most of the next 24 hours. Like, technically the same meaning. Yes, exactly. It's like, and I think that's the thing, is that the power of the media, the power of movies, but the power of TV, the power of social media, is that when you put together the right music, all the other things with it, it creates a feel-good sensation, even though what is at the root of it is not something that's actually supportive.
It makes me kind of want to rewrite the lyrics to explain exactly what they're like, throwing masking and avoidance.
It means avoiding for the rest of your days. I
It's
mean,
oblivious.
like there's so many things that, and this is true, and like we're using this as the example right now, but there are so many examples of this where
Mhm.
it's like there's the as I said, like the damsel in distress, where somebody comes in and makes her feel loved because she's never felt love before. Well, what happens when he has an affair with somebody 3 months later? Or like, what happens if he ends up like sat in front of the Xbox in his underwear, like doing nothing and never speaking to her nicely again? Like, there's
reminds me
more
of
to
the
the
quote,
story.
like, my light and shining armor turned out to be
Yes,
I'm trying to think of the word that normally is
like
there.
a
I
nerd
don't
in a
believe
tin
is
can
something.
or something.
Yeah, it's like he's wrapped in tinfoil, and it's like,
Yes,
yeah, because the
And
illusion of the
that's the
shine of
thing.
the armor at first is like, ooh, like this has to be good, and then it's like, well, what is that armor
and
made
it's that
out of?
perception of the hero, and again, like breaking it down, it's the perception of someone coming in and healing the thing in you that has been broken for the longest time. And it's like, yeah, but then you need them to heal that. Wouldn't be much, but like it would be so much better. I mean, I would love to see a Disney movie where the quote unquote princess is like, fuck this, I'm doing this for myself, kind of thing. I'm off to do my own thing. I don't need. And it was funny because like there was almost like an element of it like in Frozen, in the sense that the love interest all the way through turns out to be this awful person, and it's the sisters that actually kind of heal and save each other, kind of thing. So there is an element of that like starting to creep in, but there's still so much other stuff around it that's like, oh, that's not, oh yeah, no, that's a little red triangle
Romanticizing
there, right?
the drama triangle.
Yes. And it is, and the drama triangle is romanticized a lot. So once you've kind of got, and I think that point about Hakuna Matata is spot on. Like, so many people think that like that's like their favorite song, it's their favorite part of the movie, and it's like it's the thing that actually, I mean, the irony is that that's the thing that costs him so much of his time with his family, with his, like, finding out that actually the thing he thought was his fault wasn't his fault. Like, it costs him so much to do that, but no one ever mentions that part. It's like, oh, did jackass is Timon and Pumbaa? Look what you did to the poor kid. Like it's like nobody says that.
Right? There's literally a time transition in that song where he goes from like
a
cub to lion, and it's like that period. And you don't think, because it's like, okay, he's a cub, then like he's walking across a tree and he's a lion all of a sudden. It's like, what was that period of time that you were pretending everything was okay? Like, there's
and the truth of the matter is that I think that pretending that everything is okay, like if you were genuinely happy in that space, that would be one thing. But you find out like a little further on, like this whole time he still feels that he's to blame for everything that's happened. He's avoiding what's going on. Like, he doesn't feel good about what happened. He's just not thinking about it. Like, and one of the things is like, it's like, well, if you can't do anything about it, there's no point feeling bad about it. And it's like, well, that's called processing your emotions, Simba. Maybe we should have a session with you. But there we go. So anyway, so the next thing is that Rafiki, who is like kind of the wise elder of the community, shall we say, he comes in supporter approach. And what's really interesting is that he doesn't try and force or push him into anything. He actually starts to like put some little breadcrumbs, and then he runs away and Simba follows him. Like, he's not like pushing Simba to go in a certain direction. He like drops a little mini truth bomb, like a little glitter bomb, and then runs away, and Simba's like, wait, what? And he goes chasing after him, kind of thing. And what happens is that Rafiki and the memory of somebody else comes in and reminds him who he really is, and both of those people relate to Simba as a creator. Like, it's like, you can do this is within you. And the interesting thing is, like, Rafiki like reminds him that he can either run from the past or he can learn from it. And he literally gives him like an example of this. Like, he smacks him on the head, and the first time he's like, oh, like, it's in the past, don't feel bad about it, right? You can either feel bad about it or you can learn from it. And he goes to hit him again, and Simba ducks, and it's like, now you're starting to learn from it. Not that I believe that violence is the answer, but like in this context, that's like kind of how it's represented. But when he says he can run from the past and learn from it, he then asks a question. So what are you going to do? So what are you going to do? He's directing him back to the creator approach, and he lets Simba make the choice, and Simba then chooses and steps into creator. And the interesting thing is, Timon and Pumbaa, who were previously captain and vice captain of avoidance over here, they actually step in as supporters. Like, they go step in to be with him while he's doing the thing he needs to do. They're not rescuing him, they're supporting him in supporting himself and being there with him while he's doing it. So it's a really interesting, like, the place that I found kind of creator approaches and supporter approaches were definitely not places that I thought they were going to find. But the last example is probably the most shocking to me. Now, I have a confession to make. I had never seen this movie until like 2 days ago. So it was been on I've got a list of movies that are like on my list of things to watch for the longest time. This was one of them. The movie is The Shawshank Redemption. And I think, like, sometimes, like, there's enough strife and hassle in the world that, like, if there's something that I think could be very violent or could have some stuff in it that could be really uncomfortable to watch, there are times I'm okay with watching that stuff, and there are times when I'm like, maybe I'll wait. I sat down to watch it. Now, the interesting thing is, this is probably one of the movies that has the best examples of creator approach consistently showing up throughout the movie. Now, if you this is one of those where there are going to be spoilers in this. If you haven't seen it and you want to see it, I mean, the spoilers that I'm going to give are things that I already knew about the movie before I'd seen it. So I don't think it's like, well, that's a shock. I had no idea that was going to happen. And if you want to skip this section, feel free to do so. But it's really interesting. So I highly recommend sticking around if you can. So there's an example where there's at one point they're doing some work up on one of the roofs. And this guy can hear this. The guy in question, one of the prisoners, is a banker, and he can hear one of the guards like bitching about a situation regarding inheriting some money, and he goes over to the guard. Now, bear in mind, they're not meant to interact with the guards. This guard basically holds him over the edge of the roof of a building, like, and basically is threatening to push him off for just talking to him. I mean, that indicates the kind of.
I mean, they're not meant to look at the guards. Never mind, talk to the guards.
Yes, and he like very quickly explains how hold on a second, like, I'm like, no, you could keep all of the money if you did this, and this. And he's like, why would I believe you? And I'm like, because I'm really good at this kind of money stuff, and like, this is the thing that you could do. And he answers the questions really quickly. And he was like, well, why? He was like, I could do it for you if you want. And the guy's like, well, why would you do that for me? He was like, well, maybe just to get like 3 beers each for my fellow workers here. And it's like, again, what's his outcome? His outcome, and the interesting thing is, his outcome in that situation was actually to contribute to the others. He didn't actually end up having the beer.
It was to create some normalcy.
Yeah, exactly. He was creating normalcy for himself, and he was also creating normalcy for the other people around him. And you could see the impact it had on him. There's another section of the movie where they talk about where he's trying to get some support. I think it's from the state for the library that they for their. I mean, use the term loosely, what it is to begin with. It's one old guy with a bird in his pocket who's trying to help, trying to pass out old copies of National Geographic. So again, he knew his outcome. His outcome was to get some support so they could make more of this library. So he started sending letters every single week. And then eventually he got $200 saying, here, have $200. We now consider this matter closed. Stop sending us letters, basically, because he literally was writing letters every week. So is then, like, again, creator approach. My objective, what was his outcome? Getting some support for the library. He achieved that outcome through sending these letters. What was his next outcome? His next outcome was he wanted more support for the library than just $200 a month. So rather than sending 1 letter a month, he then started 1 letter a week. He started sending 2 letters every week and kept sending and kept sending and kept sending. And eventually they ended up with $500 a month coming in to build the library. So again, what's my outcome? What are my options for creating it? How do I go about creating it? Now, this is the point at which there's a major spoiler. Like, this guy breaks out of the prison. That's what happens towards the end of the movie. The interesting thing is his actual breakout, what he does and how he approaches doing it. And this is one of those situations where this person was innocent. he should never have been in jail in the first place. He'd been in jail, like he ends up being in jail for like 20 years. He knew his outcome. His outcome was freedom and justice. Now, in that situation, it would have been so easy. How many other people would have been like, woe is me, like, oh God, this sucks. I can't believe I've not done anything wrong and I've been put in jail and blah, 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 blah. And instead of that, he focuses on his outcome. Like, he focuses on, what do I want to do? I want to get out. And so he gets the tool that is the thing that enables him to, like, what's my objective? Here's the route I'm going to need to do in order to get out of the prison. And it's funny because I recently watched Prison Break, and this is probably Prison Break is actually another, like, it's a TV series example of the same thing. It's like, know your outcome. What are your options towards doing it? I'm going to break my brother out of prison, but to do that I have to commit a crime and get into the prison so that I can then break him out of the prison. Like, so it's same kind of thing. And again, lots of nuance around all of this. But the actual breakout, he was able to start tunneling out of his cell. But then he had the problem of, like, well, what do I do with the dirt that I'm pulling out of the wall, basically? And he slowly would, like, when they were out on the yard, he would take small bits and just, like, and interestingly enough, it's exactly the same thing they do in Prison Break. I think Prison Break was inspired by the Shawshank Redemption in that respect. Like, they took the thing and they just put every now and again they put little piles of, like, the rock and, like, stamp it into the ground and what have you. He wanted justice because at one point there's somebody who can prove that he is innocent, and because of the corruption in the prison, that person is killed. And so he wants justice for the corruption that is happening because it has affected his friend, it's affected his ability to get freedom. He figured out his options at every single point in the way. Now, one of the ways that he gets out is he tunnels through he crawls through one of the sewer tunnels, which means he crawls through basically a bunch load of shit. Like, did he want to crawl through all that crap, like literally crawl through that crap? No. But in terms of his options, like, he knew his outcome. Here are my options. My options are I stay in prison or I crawl through literally a bunch of crap. So I maybe crawl through crap for 15-20 minutes, but then I'm free for the rest of my life, versus being stuck in a jail cell for the rest of my life with no ability to get out because the person who can help me get out has been killed. Like, he took action on those objectives. Even, like, towards the end, he actually moves into the supporter approach with respect to one of his jailmates, a guy called Red. At the end, like there's a brilliant part of the thing where he's talking about having hope, and Red's like, hope's a dangerous thing, like, you shouldn't have hope, kind of thing. And so what ends up happening is, after he's escaped, eventually Red gets out. And before the escape happened, he was telling him about, like, go to this place, like if you want, like if you want to basically at some point, like, look for this, and this, and you'll find something there. And in it, he leaves some money in a letter. And basically, he doesn't tell Red what to do. He did it himself and provided the example of the fact that hope works. He provided the example of how to do it. And he invited Red to join him on the journey. And again, there was an element of contributor approach, because some of it was like he provided the funds that made it possible or easier for Red to do the thing that he did in the end. And then Red became the creator of his own journey with the support that Andy had provided along the way. So, and it's so interesting because from the, like, one of the things that Red's character says very, very early on is that when he sees Andy, that he was different. He walked like somebody who didn't have a care in the world. Like, he wasn't being kind of beaten down, even though some horrific things happened to him. And that's because he was in creator approach. He wasn't focused on the problems. He was focused on his outcome, and he was taking action. And the interesting thing is that when, like, Red is the one who helps him to get the tool initially. And Andy's like, Red's like, oh yeah, you're going to, like, tunnel out with that kind of thing. And Andy's like, when you see it, you'll see how ridiculous an idea that is. And when it finally comes, Red's like, oh yeah, it would take 600 years to tunnel out using that kind of thing. And the interesting thing is, it takes him 20. But he got out. And
he was in creator approach from that moment.
Yes, exactly. And probably even before that, because it's like, what's my outcome? My outcome is to get out of here. What are my options? How do I do that? I do a carving of rocks, so I could get this thing which would be utilized for this. But like, it's so like his character is in creator approach almost all of the way through the movie, and it was shocking to me to see that was the fact.
Well, even like, and we haven't even talked about this, but I'm thinking about some of those scenes where, you know, he is being assaulted or there's a potential of an assault. In the narrative that's going around about it, the character Andy is kind of narrating it, and you can hear him in the creator approach being like, you know, this is what's going on here, and I have to like, how am I going to deal with these people I'm up against? And you hear the options, you like, and it's kind of interesting because when Claire came up with this example, like, you know, I said on the last episode, we were kind of spitballing these ideas, and she's like, you know, the one that surprised me, she's like, the Shawshank Redemption. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Now, I was with Claire. It's been like maybe 10, 15 years since I saw it for the first time. I tried to watch it many, many, many times before that. And you have to watch it you have to give it a shot and watch it in its entirety if you're going to do it, if you haven't watched it before, because the ending just hugs it all together.
It makes the movie.
It really does. And you wouldn't think from, all right, we're talking about a prison movie that there's not.
And a prison movie about an innocent man who is sent to jail for a long period of time. You wouldn't imagine there's a whole lot of empowerment ecosystem going to be happening in that.
It is the consistent theme when you look at it from this lens. It's like, wow, like even in that situation, you can be creator, which is powerful in itself. And that's not something that the people wrote the movie and they're like, well, we're going to highlight the empowerment ecosystem here, and this person's going to be in creator the whole time. And it happened. So like, but it's such a rare occurrence in cinema. Like it really is.
And to see it consistently throughout the movie, like people are going to dip it. Like we've talked about The Lion King, we talked about The Matrix. There are moments within that. There are also moments which are absolutely not that in those same movies. And this is the one where, yes, there's a lot of, and it's interesting. Like I don't know, my gut told me I have a long list of things that I've never seen. And I actually watched The Shawshank Redemption because I imagined there would be a lot of red triangle stuff in it. That's what I thought I was going to say. And that's not to say that there isn't. There's a lot of harm dynamic in it. Like when I'm not like glossing over that. I just was shocked that there was the amount of creator and supporter and contributor approach in it that I did see. And that's why it can show up in the most unexpected. And I think it's kind of beautiful in a way that this is the movie out of all the ones we've talked about that is most consistently representing this, because if that can be true in that situation, you can take that approach in how it doesn't mean to say the situation is okay. And do I think that Andy probably needs to process how he was feeling about what was going on? And there was some stuff that he didn't do to get his needs met in the context of being the creator approach? Absolutely. It was also a while ago that it was made, and it was set in the 40s. So there were a lot more societal pressures and conditioning around that sort of stuff. So like, I'm not saying it's a perfect representation by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the fact that you can look at a situation like that and see that this is what, even in that situation, even with everything that was happening to him, even with the unfairness, he could still consistently be in creator approach and be in the empowerment ecosystem, and also support other people in getting there too. It really gives us food for thought as to how we can apply this in our own lives. Like if we have if we have a bad morning where a few things go wrong, like we can take creator approach in how we are dealing with those things that are going wrong. And obviously it's still a work of fiction. And I'm sure there are people who have done that sort of thing. So I'm not saying that just because it's a work of fiction, that would never happen. It's possible. And people like that are the exception, not the rule, because of the conditioning we have in our culture to be within the drama triangle. The good thing is now you know about this stuff. You know what's possible. You know what the shapes are. You can start to spot them. And the more you can start to spot them, you can then look for that really important track between the victim approach and the creator approach in order to connect into the empowerment ecosystem and use that for how you're approaching everything else that you're dealing with in life. Anything else you want to talk about? Like, this was a long episode today, but I mean, I hope it's been worth it. I know we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, so I'm glad that we're at this point in the process. And I hope that the examples we gave have given a little bit more clarity and a little bit more understanding to these shapes. And we will now be referring to the shapes more, I'm sure, going forward in our podcast episodes and referring back to these if you haven't seen them. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with I have no clue what we're going to be talking about, and I'm not going to try and guess it because apparently that doesn't work so well. So between now and then, remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, we can learn a lot from the movies. Not everything that feels good is good for us. A lot of it exists in the drama triangle, and you can create the empowerment ecosystem in the most unexpected of places.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.